Merrill Hodge, formerly of ESPN, the big Windsor Knot tie guy. Merrill Hodge, all about that business. I'll say this. I don't know how people feel about Merrill Hodge. I know he hasn't been on our TVs in a while. I actually used to be a huge Merrill Hodge guy, and I could see like the pretentiousness of the tie and kind of the attitude is just so dead serious, not really jokey. But man, were his evaluations when he would give some on quarterbacks, it's not that he never missed. It's that sometimes on, really polarizing quarterbacks, he'd come and be like, nah, that guy's not good.
He's a smart guy.
He's very smart. He understands the game. He was on Press Row, Radio Row this week going into the Super Bowl. And he had this to say. He was asked about Caleb Williams. And he watches film. He breaks this stuff down. Here was Merrill Hodge on NBC Chicago, who has the number one pick, Chicago does, on Caleb Williams.
Well, I've only watched Caleb Williams 3 games last year, 3 this year, so I'm only halfway done, okay? The one thing that is clear, he is not special. He is not something unique like a Patrick Mahomes, and I hope the Bears don't think, well, let's try to make up for our mistake when we pass up Patrick Mahomes and go get the Patrick Mahomes. The kid is not Patrick Mahomes. Ain't even remotely close to that. So it is unfair to Justin Fields. He has had new coordinator. There's no possible way you can know about your guy when you do that. It's the worst thing that can happen to any player, especially a quarterback. Now, when Justin came out, the one thing that I thought he had just inexperience. He just needed more experience. He lacked that. But what I have seen in Justin Fields, from my evaluation, there's enough growth and hope there that I would not let him go because I see enough there.
So he would, Merrill Hodge, rather build with Fields, and he says Caleb Williams is not special. I got to admit.
Bold take, Bob.
A little surprised by it. Now, I think the tough thing is there's just the track record of drafting quarterbacks. Yeah, you got some ones that you can name, but you also have how many more that you can't, that you're just like bust. I don't know if DC is going to step in and give Chicago a sweetheart of a deal and say, you can't say no to this, and then we want the pick. We want to bring Caleb home. But it's surprising to hear somebody like Merrill Hodge, who I think knows football pretty well, studies it enough. He'll study some more game tape, and him to say out loud, Caleb's not special. I don't know, Will. I'm not claiming to be Mr. X's and O's. Merrill Hodge could run circles around my knowledge.
Right.
And I'm not even saying he's wrong. But, man, when I watched him, I didn't feel that way. Again, I don't know coverages. I don't understand the nuance of what's supposed to happen in plays. I don't know, even in USC's case, I didn't know how much was Caleb being improviser and moving around guy versus offensive line leaking a little too much. Largely, I just watched Caleb and said, damn, this dude is special, and I would take him in a second. And then Merrill Hodge is like, not really.
What I felt like when I watched Caleb Williams is he bolstered that team. There's a reason that USC started the season in the top 10, and it's a lot of overvaluing some of their players just because they are USC guys, right? Like, oh, that kid's at USC, he must be a 4-star. He must be a 5-star. That wasn't a top 10 team, but they had a top 1 quarterback, right? And he was the best player, I feel like, in college football. Now, did he win the Heisman this year? No, of course not. He didn't have the numbers.
I don't know if we're ever going to see a back-to-back Heisman ever again. Voters did it once, and they're just like, Archie Griffin good, nobody else.
I don't think they'll allow it. It's the same thing with no one will ever win 3 MVP trophies in a row in the NBA because Michael didn't do it. Michael didn't do it? If Michael didn't do it, Jokic can't do it.
Hell, they got a stance on Mike having 5. Like, nobody else is worthy of 5. It's like,
okay, well, if he's the best player and most valuable player, don't you think he should win? But anyways, I digress. The issue with evaluating quarterbacks, when you look, and I think the number is, it's in the top 10, not even first-round quarterbacks, top 10 quarterbacks, it's a 50-50 hit rate.
Yeah.
And Merrill Hodge is very smart, right? Like, he has some picks in there where right away, he saw Johnny Manziel, and he goes, I would not touch that dude. I would not draft him. And he's had other quarterbacks where he said, hey, I think that guy's a QB. I think he'll be successful, that have blown up.
I believe he really liked Patrick Mahomes.
I believe you are correct.
When he was coming into the draft, he was one of the people who's like, Patrick Mahomes is a dude.
I think he's the one that hit on that because Patrick was not thought of as highly as most people. Like when he got drafted, everyone was thinking it was Trubisky and Watson.
Yeah,
and
that was a reach. Somewhere were like, this is a reach. Kansas City traded up.
Everyone was shocked.
There was a video that got circulated with their former GM, John Dorsey, and he ended up getting fired like 3 months after they drafted Mahomes. But he's doing this press conference, and he's like, this is the kid. We believe. I'm telling you, I disagree with the takes, and this is the guy.
Right.
And then they circle it, and they cut to the media types, and they're all like, Chris Carter, the only one that's going to win a Super Bowl in this group is Watson. That's the only one. And then they go to another media guy. This guy's not good enough. This guy, really? There was a guy that broke down his college film. Was like, his footwork's too sloppy. He's too loose. He turns the ball over. You can't trust him in decision making. Like, he has been wrong like 5 different ways.
Right.
So that was, a little bit of a bold take on Patrick Mahomes.
But to be fair about that, Merrill Hodge's endorsement of Patrick Mahomes isn't why Patrick Mahomes was good, because a lot of the people that went after Mahomes and said, hey, he can't read a defense. He is playing backyard football. This are the things that he's doing. When you listen to Patrick Mahomes in interviews, he specifically thanks Alex Smith for teaching him how to read a defense. He didn't know how to ID the mic. Sprague, in football, if you cannot ID the mic, you cannot set your protection. If you cannot ID the mic, you cannot identify what coverage the other team is. He couldn't do it when he got into the NFL. Most people are able to do that right away. We talked about it in the first segment. He was just that good of an athlete. He didn't have to learn that. And so Merrill Hodge could have said all these great things about Patrick Mahomes and thinking that he'd be successful. Well, if Pat doesn't go and get taught by Andy Reid and doesn't learn from Alex Smith, a true pros pro, a guy who had to learn all these things like where's the mic? How do I set my protection? If I want to call a hot route, what hot route should I call against this defense? Is it zone? Is it man? How do I figure these things out? Because if Alex Smith doesn't figure that out, Alex Smith doesn't play in the NFL. And then...
Well, he almost didn't. He kept going from coordinator to coordinator, and Harbaugh comes and like, oh, that guy's not any good, and boom, NFC title game.
Right. And then to be gracious enough to have a quarterback that's willing to teach him, because multiple quarterbacks have been out about we're not willing to teach that person. So when Merrill Hodge says, hey, I'm out on Caleb Williams, when I look at Caleb Williams, I go, that dude has special athleticism. Now, I'm not watching the All-22. I'm not in the meetings. I don't know if he has some of the same issues as Patrick Mahomes. So he has to be athletically special. And when he goes in and he plays against NFL defenses, will he be able to continue that way? We saw it with Vince Young. Vince Young didn't learn how to do the pre-snap stuff. Vince Young was out of the league fast. So that's something that could happen with Caleb Williams. But to me, when I look at Caleb Williams, look at his ceiling. His ceiling is on par with the greatest quarterback in the NFL right now, a guy that some people are already making GOAT conversations with. People are saying Patrick Mahomes could get to Brady, right? So if his ceiling is that, why would I not take him? Or if I am going to move on.
Yeah, but here's the thing. We don't know if that's the ceiling. That's the ceiling we ourselves say, oh, he's improvising. Look at this throw. Right. It's a sidearm.
Right.
We don't know anybody else that did it. Vince Young, to your point, I don't know where people were at with Vince Young in that draft. But this is kind of the thing with Caleb that sucks, Will, is you're dependent on your environment.
100%.
Vince Young went to 7-9 bowl. Jeff Fisher, I think he won Rookie of the Year, and then never did anything the next couple years, and just like that, out of league. Now he probably had off the field things as well, but some of this it's a part of the equation. Caleb has been living in this world of constant gratification and fawning over, and I'm not saying he's not tested for it. Some would point to this season and say, look how he handled it. But he's going to Chicago. The thing about Chicago that's interesting is they kept Eberflus.
That dude's a dweeb.
I kind of tend to agree. I don't think he's the guy. So is he going to thrive despite his circumstance? Chicago's never had a truly elite quarterback. Their best quarterback, just by a talent measure, is Jay Cutler.
Right. And he was smoking cigs.
They've never had a 4,000-yard passer. Ever. They've been one of the most embarrassing franchises in pro sports.
Right.
And I think he's good, but is he going to go there and succeed despite the circumstance? That's the tough thing. Merrill Hodge might be right, but I don't know if he's right because of the evaluation or if he's going to be right because of the circumstance and the team.
Right.
And I think that's the hard thing to project.
And I completely agree with you there because, and the points I made about Mahomes. Merrill Hodge was right that he had the highest ceiling and he could be successful, but he was successful because of outside factors as well as his own work ethic. I think you can make the argument Vince Young was unsuccessful because he loved buffets too much. Right? Like he had his own choices. He didn't work out.
I want to see he had like a little bit of a drinking thing.
Yeah, he got fat. I know he wasn't on the perp drink like Jamarcus Russell was. But sometimes when you look at it too, his potential is so high, but there's the outside circumstances. But if the outside circumstances are what they are in Chicago, and it's probably the worst place to go if you're a quarterback, does that then mean Drake May would be successful there? Does that then mean Jaden Daniels? Like, so to me, if you're Chicago, you have to take Caleb Williams. This is a dude who has the potential to reach this number. People are talking about him on par with being a prospect like a John Elway, like an Andrew
He's
Luck,
a franchise guy.
like a Trevor Lawrence.
Yes.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take that guy. And if that guy doesn't hit, then that guy doesn't hit and we're all wrong except for Merrill Hodge. But if you take Drake May or you take Jaden Daniels or Michael Penix or Bo Nick, like whoever, JJ McCarthy, whoever, throw any quarterback in there and you take that person and they don't hit, but Caleb hits in Washington or he hits
or New England
in New England.
Yep. God, could you imagine if somehow he got to New England, you're like, oh, cool. And he became Caleb, like the Caleb you and I think is going to be, and he goes to New England. It's like, awesome. I'm glad they got another franchise guy.
Right.
Chicago and DC, they don't need one. When's the last time DC had one?
Guess
Kirk Cousins, RG3.
RG3 for a year.
Jason Campbell.
The guy who got his leg shattered by LT.
It's Merrill Hodge, not a fan of Caleb Williams. A little surprised to hear him classify it the way that he did. We'll see what Chicago is going to do.